one name again on the list who ended up, I think it's in the second part of his career why he's on this list, and that's George Foreman. If anyone wants to have an example of someone who can really change their personality and come back a completely different person, not just in boxing but in sports, George Foreman is that person. And I imagine he's on the list because his transcendence. There was a bit of it, obviously, in the 70s with the Rumble in the Jungle and whatnot, but in the late 80s all the way up to the late 90s, I think that's when you really see his transcendence into popular culture.
Yeah, if he had stayed retired and never came back, I don't know if he would have made the book based on just the first part of his career. Uh,
Mhm.
Maybe I would give him an honorable mention because he beat Joe Frazier and he beat Ken Norton, and those were big important fights. So maybe he would get an honorable mention or something. Um, but because of that second half of his career, uh, I think he did sort of become like an Ali or like a Dempsey. He became this big figure in the sport and transcended the sport, and uh, he made a lot of people happy when you think about it. A lot of people liked hearing about
Mhm.
George's comeback, um, and the public was into it before the press was into it. The press did their best to shoot him down. Um, I don't know if you remember, uh, but the press they were cynical about George coming back, you know, and but the public they were buying tickets, and they were buying the pay-per-views. The public got behind George long before the press did. Um, and then of course when George finally retired, then the press kind of jumped on the bandwagon, you know, saying,
Mhm.
"Oh, it was such a great comeback, such a history-making comeback," and blah blah blah. The public was behind George uh, long before the press.
Cool. One person who's on the list, and I've spoken about this person on previous podcasts, as someone who, the way they transcended the sport, you don't even get a sports star do this, even in this day and age, especially social media and the internet. And that's Mike Tyson. I think people who are younger, I mean, I'm in my coming up to my mid 40s. I think people who are in their like like less than 40 years old don't realize how transcendent Tyson was as a force of nature. Even if you didn't watch boxing, just him as a person was so transcendent. As I said, you don't even get that now with, never mind celebrities, just a lot of athletes in general. Like, just describe to people, bear in mind this was the 80s as well, you had no internet, how Tyson managed to transcend the not just a boxing world, but a boxing world, but culturally as well.
Yeah, Tyson. Again, it was the heavyweight thing.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
if Tyson had been a welterweight, it wouldn't have happened. You know,
Mhm.
um, he was a heavyweight. He was a knockout puncher, all action, um, and he was young too. I think that had something to do with the appeal. I think the press and the public they liked the idea of this really young guy. Uh, I think he was 20, the youngest heavyweight champion ever. I think that was appealing for a lot of people. They just love the idea of this young, exciting kid, because for a few years, but boxing always goes in peaks and valleys.
Mhm.
Um, and there had been uh, a lot of boxing coverage in the 80s, uh, but when Tyson came along, it was during a slight dip because uh, Ray Leonard was still the biggest name in the business, but Ray Leonard was starting to pick his opponents and only fighting every couple of years. And people wanted somebody who was really going to come out and create some excitement. You know, they didn't want this guy like Leonard who was only fighting occasionally. They wanted somebody to come out and really excite them, and that was Tyson. You know,
Mhm.
the press jumped on it. He had the New York connection too.